Hello, and welcome back to Battle Plan, a podcast focused on spiritual warfare. I'm Steve Hemphill, and Battle Plan is an ongoing discussion of how we put our faith into action and ways we can make a difference in our world around us today. Our website is active-faith.org. Today is a very special day. Been looking forward to this for a long time. I know we have listeners from really all over the world. We have 160 countries downloading the podcast. We're up to about 250,000 downloads now, and this is a big day for us at Battle Plan because we have Steve Deace here, who is part of Nefarious. He's part of the Glenn Beck network of podcasts. He's in the political arena, a big proponent of conservatism and President Trump and the good things going on with our country now, and also the author of a children's book. He's going to talk a little bit about all of that today. Steve, welcome to the show.
You bet, Steve. Thank you for having me, brother. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for taking a few minutes. I know you have a very busy schedule. I found out about Steve through the nefarious work he's done and through his producer and then through Yako. And we've been associated with Yako's podcast for a long time. But I just thought Nefarious was a brilliant book and a brilliant movie. I tell people, I do seminars around the country on spiritual warfare called Demons versus Prayer. I talk about your movie Nefarious all everywhere I go, and I want to thank you for that. It's a brilliant conversation between an atheist and a demon, and I love how that was put together. So, congratulations on the success of that and your work in the arena of spiritual warfare. I'd let you just tell a little bit about that, and then go into the book we're going to talk about today, your newest children's book.
Sure. So the idea originally came on my very first trip to Washington, D.C. To promote my first wide release book, and I was in the shower getting ready to go do some promotional interviews, and this little voice in the back of my head said, "This book is dedicated to all the useful idiots out there, especially those of you who had no idea you were being used all this time. For you proved to be the most useful idiots of them all." Nefarious. And I thought, Steve, that's a very weird thing to think of in the shower.
Yeah.
And so I kind of just let it percolate there for a while. And when I got back later that evening, I just, I couldn't sleep. So, and there's lots of things to do in Washington, D.C. when you're a guy out there on your own that will get you in trouble if you can't sleep. I didn't want to do any of those. So
Right.
I just sat down at my laptop and just started, working with this thing that popped into my head. And before you know it, I had what would later become the introduction to a nefarious plot worked out a couple of hours later. And I called a couple of theologian friends of mine, one of them with a charismatic background and one of them with a reformed background,
Yeah.
because I wanted to get dueling opinions on what I had constructed.
Sure.
And I called them both and I said, "Hey, I'm not going to tell you what this is. I'm just going to read it to you cold. And I want you guys to tell me your reactions." And so I did that night, and they were both absolutely blown away. They both told me, "You're onto something. You have this is a book here, or the introduction to one." And then I told them what it was, and I realized that we had a chance here to maybe write a sequel to a Screwtape Letters, to take
Yes.
the threat that that Uncle Screwtape demonstrates that the dark realm is to us as individuals, and expand it now to what happens if that should overtake an entire culture. And so that became the book, A Nefarious Plot. And in the book, Nefarious lays out why he was tasked by the devil with the destruction of the United States, how he did it, whom he chose and utilized to do it, names names, connects dots, and then decides to put it out in front and in our faces to prove to his master that the plan had been successful, because we're so far gone now that even if he were to articulate exactly what's happened to us, we would still not believe it.
Yeah.
And I got a call one day, and I know him well, and we worked together, but I did not know him at all at the time. And I got a call one day from a guy named Glenn Beck saying, "Hey, a mutual friend of ours turned me on to your book, and it just blew my mind. Do you want to come on my show and talk about it?" And I thought, well, I definitely don't want 10 million listeners to hear about this book I wrote, but I decided to do it anyway, Steve. Okay. And that afternoon or that morning, a young dad out in LA named Chris Jones was driving around town with his kids and taking him to daycare and preschool, and heard me talking about this book. And he gets to the office, buys it on Kindle, and reads it in one setting before his two partners, Kerry Solomon and Chuck Conselman, get into the office. Well, these three guys were about to start a new production company called Believe Entertainment. They had been responsible for writing and helping to produce the breakout hit for PureFlix, God's Not Dead.
Yeah.
And they wanted to form their own production company and maybe do things that were a little bit grittier. And they were just beginning pre-production on an adaptation of Abby Johnson's memoir as a Planned Parenthood worker called Unplanned.
Unplanned, yeah.
And so they were wondering, they always wanted to do something on spiritual warfare. Chris is a Pentecostal, and Carrie and Chuck are very charismatic Catholics. So they always wanted to delve into this realm, but trying to find the right subject matter that doesn't glorify evil at the same time is not easy to find.
Amen.
And so when Carrie and Chuck got into work that day, Chris said to him, he goes, hey, I found our next movie. All right, pick a page number, any page number out of this book, and I'm going to read it to you. And so I don't know what page Carrie chose, but Chris read it to him. And Carrie's like, that's a book, or that's a movie. And so later that evening, I get a text message, or an email actually saying, hey, we want to buy the rights to your book. And I thought, man, Nigerian princes are getting strangely specific in their scams these days, and I deleted the email, and went back to what I was doing that night. And little voice in the back of my head said, yeah, you might want to reconsider that, And so I went and looked them up, and they were legit. And turns out, yeah, they did want to buy the movie rights to the book. After they were done finishing Unplanned, we then ran into COVID. And then we started storyboarding the week that Gavin Newsom opened California up for the first time. I got on a plane and went out there. And we storyboarded the movie that week. Spent about the next 10 months. They did finalizing the script. And then what commenced was a almost 2 year battle of spiritual warfare to get from a completed script to into theaters in April of 2023.
Yeah, because you faced a lot of issues during that process, didn't you?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, our two directors both got COVID pneumonia when we first started shooting the movie, and they're both in their 60s. And if you know that period of time, because of how barbaric the hospitals by and large were treating people, it was literally a flip of a coin if you went into the hospital that you were coming out. All right. They were both in there for 3 months. They eventually did get out, but now we had missed our production window, and my company was financing the film, had to go in for another $1 million just to hold on to our sets and our crew. And then our crew, many of them are the same guys that worked non-union for Believe for Unplanned, because even though they weren't a union production, Believe was paying them better than the union was.
Yeah.
Well, then they decided in a right to work state in Oklahoma to try shutting our production down with a strike.
Yeah.
So I had to go down to Oklahoma with political contacts I have and mobilize them just to literally get our movie made.
Yeah.
We then half of the crew would not come back. So we had to film it in a skeleton crew. The guy who did cinematography had never shot a film before. He was an apprentice.
I talked to him too. Yeah.
Yeah. His boss is who plotted the strike against us. Okay.
Yeah.
Now he did a wonderful job in that where you see the camera move back and forth between, Sean being nefarious and Eddie. That was entirely his idea. He did great. Okay. But every conceivable obstacle you could have, including near-death experiences, we had to getting this movie out. But here's the thing your audience needs to know. This was both the most faith-challenging thing I've experienced, other than raising kids, and the most faith-rewarding thing I've experienced other than raising kids.
Yeah.
Because we always talk about spiritual warfare like this is the devil's playground and we are his, he's the minstrel and we are his puppets.
Yeah.
We saw God open doors, make things happen that just we could have never done on our own. And the movie would not have gotten made and finished if he had not. And I'll close with, this is my favorite example. So we finished shooting the film finally, and we're struggling to find an editor who understands the needle we're trying to thread, in that the movie has like horror elements, but it doesn't have any gore or any jump scares. And it's supposed to be a legitimate theological treatise, right? So there's not a lot of people that know how to edit that.
Right.
And so we hired an editor, someone actually been nominated for an Academy Award, but he'd never done this genre. And the first rough cut he turned in was so bad that my directors didn't want to show it to me. Now, I don't know this at the time, Steve. And so I'm just doing my show on the Blaze one day, and I get an email from a guy named Brian Jeremiah Smith. And he says, "You don't know me. I'm a huge fan of your show. I love Nefarious Plot. I cannot wait to see the movie." Well, I'm one of the editors here at Netflix, and I got put on paid leave because I was the only editor that would not take the jab. And just when they were about to fire me, the Supreme Court ruled that the Biden mandate was unconstitutional. So now they don't know what to do, and I'm on an indefinite paid leave. And just in case you guys need any help, you're probably too far along in the post-production process. But just in case, if there's anything I can do, here's my resume. And I open up his resume, and it's all films in this kind of thriller horror genre.
Yeah.
It's all he's done.
Yeah.
Okay. And I thought to myself, man, too bad we didn't know about this guy 6 weeks ago. We could have really used him, you know? So I thought, you know what, though, I'm going to send it to my guys just in case, not knowing, again, the rough shape the movie was in. All right. Yeah. And so I sent it to them, and I get right back on the air. Next commercial break, I've got a reply back from Chris Jones again saying, "Hey, funny you should mention this because we were trying to figure out how to tell you the movie is in a tough spot right now. We're not sure how to save it. We're going to reach out to this guy the next day."
Wow.
So they did. They could not afford him, but he reminded us, he said, "Listen, Netflix is paying me. So you guys pay me what you can. I'm making good money from Netflix. You pay me what you can, and let's save this movie." And if Carrie and Chuck were here, they would tell you that Brian was the Mariano Rivera of our film. All right. It was the bottom of the ninth. Yeah. The home team had the bases loaded and nobody out. We needed to strike out the side, and he did. He came in and saved the game. Okay. Yeah. And he fulfilled the scriptures, you know, the wealth of the wicked is stored up for the righteous. We could have never found Brian. We could have never afforded Brian if we could find him. But Netflix paid him to save our movie. So you can thank the Lord for that one.
Only God can make those kind of things happen.
Exactly.
Well, after having been a huge fan of C.S. Lewis and Screwtape Letters, and then, of course, Frank Peretti's stuff was groundbreaking, and Randy Alcorn followed up on that with modern versions of that. Really, we have been in a drought of that kind of book, even much less to turn into a movie. And this was the time. You hit the perfect storm, I think, for that. And I just want to say congratulations. Thank you for doing that. I hear, aren't you in the process of working on a sequel right now?
We are. We are in that process. It's kind of quiet right now, but we are working on that as we speak. Yes.
Okay. Well, Carrie and Chuck contacted me one day. They heard about the spiritual warfare stuff we have going on, and you know a little bit about that. But that's how I met them, and was trying to eventually get connected to have you on the show. Okay. You've written 12 or 13 books. I can't even keep up with how many. But tell us about the newest one that's now a new release on Amazon that's for children.
So I wanted to come up with a troll, and I'm a big believer in the old Irish Catholic saying that what the devil hates the most is to be mocked. and I think a lot of the evil we tolerate because we view it as foreboding, fearsome, unconquerable, and we are afraid of the consequences of pushing back on it. And so it becomes self-enforcing, Steve, because we fear consequences. We don't push back on it to see if the consequences are actually worth fearing, you know? Right. And this is where growing up with an abusive dad helped me, because the first couple times you get beaten around, you realize it's really not that bad. He ain't that tough.
Yeah. And
it was really the fear of what he would do was way more crippling than doing of the deed itself. Yeah. Right?
No doubt.
Because also there eventually becomes a day now that he's older and I'm young and I'm strong and I'm bigger than him. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. All right. Where the you find out it ain't no fun when the rabbit's got the gun. But that fear is what's paralyzing, even more than the consequences themselves. The fear of them is what paralyzes us.
That's right.
And so I think if we can destigmatize that fear, if we can pillory it, pander it, or satire it, parody it. This is what the Babylon Bee has done so brilliantly in the last 5 or 6 years.
They sure have.
And you demystify the evil, and people are like, you know, there was a bully in that we all faced my first year in middle school, and he was a kid that got held back, and so he was bigger. He was bigger than every kid. And he used to walk. You know, he hit puberty before everybody else, and he used to just walk right into you in the hallway, and put his shoulder into you and hurt you real bad and laugh at you in front of your friends, right? Well, one day he did it to the wrong kid. He did it to another kid who got held back too, and also had gone through puberty a year earlier than everybody else. And that kid beat the crap out of him, Steve, right there in the hallway.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then a bunch of other kids who saw that the bully wasn't that tough, they all then got their licks in and said, yeah, and that's for what you did to me last month. In fact, it got so bad for that bully. He got so destigmatized, he had to transfer schools. In
Wow.
one school year, he went from the terror of the hallways to he had to evacuate quicker than you could say Dunkirk, right?
My goodness.
Because the stigma of the fear of him was gone.
Yeah.
And that's what's lacking. We don't have a lot of pastors anymore who fulfill the calling of feeding the sheep and, metaphorically speaking, shooting the wolves.
Yeah.
And so Augustine's prophecy that there are many sheep without but many wolves within is true in many of our churches. And
Yes.
people are afraid to speak up even in church for fear that they'll get ridiculed by the wolves allowed to just sit there next to them.
That's right.
So I think it's time to pull the devil's pants down for a change. You know, he wants us all to pull our pants down all the time, Steve, and let the freak flag fly. Let's give him what he wants. Let's pull his down.
Yeah.
Let's show people that in the end, he is not the yin to God's yang. He is not God's co-rival. At best, he is Lex Luthor to God's Superman, and at any point, Superman could take Lex Luthor out if he really wanted to.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
And the reality is that that the power that ultimately he gives, that we grant him is from our own fear of him.
That's right.
And so, could we come up with something that would make fun of him and his prized shibboleth of our era, Pride Month? And that's what Richie Meets the Rainbow is. It rhymes like Dr. Seuss. It's very funny, but it has a meaning behind it. And what happens is, what is happening in our schools every day in America these days is a young man goes to school and he gets indoctrinated by his blue-haired teacher into the gender cult, the pride cult.
Yeah.
Except he's got a weapon that most kids don't have nowadays, a dad. So he goes home, or at least a dad that's involved and cares.
Yeah.
So he goes home over the dinner table and he tells his dad what he was taught at school, and he's really struggling to understand it and what it means. And so he's got this weapon called a dad, and then his dad's got his own weapon. It's called the Bible,
Yeah.
right? So he pulls it out and reads to his kid the true origin of pride and what it really means. And then dad vows that school I am gonna make myself extremely well known at that school board moving forward. I'm not. This is not passive. I will get activated. I will confront. I will take initiative. Like God confronts, takes initiative. I will follow his lead. Okay. I will confront. I will take initiative. And along the way, though, yes, it's pointed, but it's funny. You'll laugh out loud. Again, it's written like a Dr. Seuss book. And Steve, we are this close right now to being a national bestseller on Amazon in the LGBTQ category in the middle of Pride Month.
Wow.
The ultimate troll. So your audience right here could put us over the top. And listen, I make $3 a book. I'm not getting rich off of this, right? So to quote the Joker in The Dark Knight, it's not about the money. It's about sending a message.
The message.
Okay.
That's right.
I think we all have a vested interest in seeing Richie Meets the Rainbow, the true origin of Pride Month, trending as a bestseller in the LGBTQ category at Amazon right in the middle of Pride Month. So if your audience could be the ones that push us over the top right now, we're very close to breaking into the top 100, which would give us bestseller status. Your audience could be the ones that put us over the top, brother. I would appreciate that if they would go to Amazon, search for Richie. It's Richie, Richie. And make sure if you get your book, read the back cover endorsements very carefully. I think you'll enjoy those quite a bit.
Okay. I appreciate that so much. I think you appreciate how you're focusing on the issues that are so pertinent today. I think you're right on target with the fear thing. Fear and faith can't coexist. So Satan is so focused on fear because it drives out our faith. Also, I believe he's focusing on the fear in children because if he can train us to be fearful as children, it's easier to get us to be fearful as an adult, like the bullet story that you talked about too. In fact, we have a new book out for children, Harry's Scary Dreams, Dante's Harry's Scary Dreams, and it is about kids that have nightmares, and then they finally tell their parents about the nightmares, and they put Bible verses under the corners of their bed, and the nightmares stop. They dream they have angels. So thank you. I think we need to be focusing on more children's books like that to get the message out early, because the enemy is certainly focusing on indoctrinating our children in every possible way. Well, you have a busy schedule. We're going to not hold you up any longer today, but go look up Nefarious, watch that show, share it with friends, go to Amazon and buy the new book and support this. And we just want to remind everyone before we leave today, God loves you and I love you, and prayer still works, so keep praying. Thank y'all and have a great day.